far as turnover, you mentioned we're always going to have turnover. And it sounds like when you're investing what you are in your business toward building your team and building that rapport, you're going to have less turnover as a result, just inherently because of the nurturing factor. What are you seeing the largest amount of turnover in your team as a result of?
I mean, it's hard to recruit the new generation. We generally, if they fit our culture, we're really good at keeping them. So I would tell you, I'm giving out 6 20-year awards this year. I gave out 3
Wow.
and then I've got probably, the middle third of all of our people have been with us more than 7 years.
Welcome to Brazen and Bold. Today's guest went from creating magic as a Disney Imagineer to building a powerhouse brand in the salon and med spa industry, and now is also a founder of a media company. Get ready to be impressed and blown away, Mr. Kip Dodson. Kip, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Happy to be here, Heather. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. And, I actually feel like I know Kip because we've had a few different meetings on Zoom and conversations and worked together in different capacities over the last little over a year now. And I was honored to meet him most recently in person at Data Driven, the salon summit that was held in Scottsdale. And that was a really great time. Kip, tell me what you loved about that salon summit this year.
It's always the people, getting to know people a little more, getting into the conversation about, what people are struggling with, how we're handling it. And there was a new topic. There's not one that just glares at me. I thought Maya did really well. Maya's presentation was excellent. I think if there was one thing that's been glaring at me, it's all the AI integrations that you could potentially be doing, and you need to be mindful of whether you want to or not.
I like that. Yeah. Watch out, here they come, ready or not. I do appreciate that. And I think that's so important. For sure. And you have a degree or a background, you have an MBA, and a background as well in engineering. It's not often that I see a lot of engineers take the leap from being an engineer, an MBA, to owning a salon and med spa. Let's just say, if you had to think of a scale of personality types and traits and people, we would probably have engineers over here and hairstylist salon owners over here. How did you decide to take that leap? Like, what crossed your mind? What occurred to you? You've owned this salon for over 20 years. And tell me how that came into your life and how that came into being.
I wanted to own my own business that had a lot of impact, that had almost nothing to do with corporate America and nothing to do with what I was doing, but had strong community. And I've definitely been unique in the fact that I love people. So I love building, just communities, if you will, and basically collaborating across a lot of connecting the right people, collaborating in the right ways, delivering beauty and peace is the way I say it. And then when I found a moment's piece, it really connected to me. And I love the fact that we manufacture and engineer a moment's piece for everybody every day, including the staff.
Which is actually so important.
Yeah, it's very important.
So important.
I say it all starts with the staff. If we're not treating one another properly, then it's never going to translate to the guest.
When you found a moment's piece, was it an existing business or was this something that you founded from the ground up?
So it was 18 months old. And I introduced myself to the founder, creator of it, told them I wanted to buy it. It was in a very good place. It turns out they were it was more successful than they thought it was going to be. And they wanted someone to take it over. So my wife and I took it over. My wife ended up not really liking it initially. So she was in it at first and then she was out of it. And now she's just really gone off and does her other thing. And I've been blessed with 2 managers that have been running it for 20 years. For me.
That's exceptional. And it does speak volumes about your leadership and your emphasis on, as you mentioned, engineering a magic experience with your team first, and then being able to provide that peaceful, supportive environment and community building to your guest experience, which I think is amazing. When you think about your journey over the last 20 years, and I mean, when you said you want to do something totally different from corporate America, and I think, like I said, you went for that extreme opposite and you went for it big, which I think is amazing. In that jump, what would you say was the wildest part of your journey so far as an entrepreneur in this experience for you?
I mean, the wildest part is always the people, but I feel that's a strength. Like it's a challenge, when there's an upset that I'm trying to figure out the resolution to it. And it just fit that, it's still today. I mean, I would tell you today, it's hiring the right people. So it's a constant effort. And you're going to have turnover. So you just play for the long game. And we celebrate people when they say they're leaving. And we literally come out and say, well, our goal is to win your heart and mind back. So we want to make sure your decision is your decision, and we want you to do that. But if you change your mind, the door's still open, and we've gotten a few back, quite frankly. So that mindset just tells people we're in a journey. We're not in this for the short haul. So that's, I think, a key.
I think that's really a great perspective, and it speaks to the relationship, the long-term relationship, whether or not this person winds up could be considered a competitor in your industry down the street, but you're going to celebrate them and you're going to encourage them in their growth and in their journey. What does it look like for you? You spoke of recruiting and hiring the right people. What does your recruiting process look like at A Moment's Peace? Is this a constant effort? Is it a persistent campaign, or is it something that you kind of ease in and out of depending on your needs? Can you tell me about that?
Well, we've had to redefine it for sure, because it used to be we were turning away resumes and not really having to go out and headhunt people. But now we've turned it into we're socially going out through digital media and trying to make relationships and connections and constantly putting the word out to recruit people. And then we listen to what our clients say about our competitors. And the other thing that people should know is I'm a hair salon and a 2 times bigger spa. So that is the unusual characteristic of us. We're $4 million in revenue generally annually, and that's 60 people. And we're delivering over 5 major categories of service. So there's hair, there's nails, there's massage, there's skincare. And then I have like all the gift card and tanning that we do.
Which is incredible. Do you have a medical aesthetic practice or a med spa component to your spa?
We do next door. It's a separate entrance. It's a medical visit. I call it not A Moment's Peace, more like a medical consultation. So it hurt, so it's not A Moment's Peace. But what ended up happening was people would say, well, I'm thinking about doing this more evasive thing, or what do you think? Or, I'm thinking about microneedling or an advanced chem peel, or I'm thinking about how do I tighten this chin thing? And we found that we wanted to give a great referral to somebody who was then going to say, I can do the evasive and the extreme, but bottom line is you still want to do the routine and the moisturizing and the facials and the wellness. Because if you don't have your routine spiritually and your routine wellness, you don't have to have the evasive.
That's a great point. And also we can chemical peel our faces to here and back, but if we're not drinking enough water, I live in Phoenix, so if we're not wearing sunscreen and a hat and then protecting ourselves, and there's a lot of different things that we can, like you mentioned, take into our holistic practice in our mind, body, and spirit that would affect the overall outcome for sure. Listen, you can freeze the lines on my forehead with all the Botox you want, but if I'm worrying every day of my life and stressed out, it's going to show and it's going to convey in what I'm doing. So I do appreciate that. And I think that it sounds like even your stance with that, your holistic approach to the way you're caring for and seeing your guests is also going to be very, very much a part of what you're doing as well, and how you're caring for your mind, body, and spirit, which it's just it's a holistic approach to what you're doing in general with your business and work. So I think that's amazing. As far as turnover, you mentioned we're always going to have turnover. And it sounds like when you're investing what you are in your business toward building your team and building that rapport, you're going to have less turnover as a result, just inherently because of the nurturing factor. What are you seeing the largest amount of turnover in your team as a result of?
It's hard to recruit the new generation. We generally, if they fit our culture, we're really good at keeping them. So I would tell you, I'm giving out 6 20-year awards this year. I gave out 3 last, and then I've got probably, the middle third of all of our people have been with us more than 7 years. So I think it's just the fact that we're just that inclusive, there's no drama. We have a theme of to deliver a moment's peace, you have to live and deliver upon your name. So that's our brand promise. That has to happen within the staff. And, if you can't do that, then, just take a pause and we give you all the freedom and flexibility that you need to go do what you do. And most people that love our culture are excited to go to work in a stress-free environment, a positive environment, producing beauty and peace. So, to answer your question, when we have turnover, it's just that you can't not have turnover. Life comes at you fast. People change.
Yeah, some people move, illnesses. Yeah. They decide they want to be an engineer themselves. They're like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of this non-corporate America setting. I want to go opposite of this peaceful, relationship-oriented experience. I'm going to go do the exact opposite. What? You did it, and maybe someone will do that. You might be pleasantly surprised when your next hairstylist turns into an engineer herself, right?
That's right.
And I
There is a
think you would
hairstyle.
celebrate it.
Yeah, I do know some hairstylists that went to be like masters and MBAs, PhDs, and so there's some.
I love that. You have multiple, you're mentioning the awards that you're giving out with your team, celebrating them and really rewarding people who have been loyal to your brand and helped move your culture and your work forward, which I think is beautiful and such an important part of retention and building rapport. But let's talk about some of the awards you've received. And I think this is something very worth noting, especially because of some of the unique aspects here. But you've won Salon Today's Top 200 award multiple years with your space and your innovation. And I think something that is really unique about what you've done and applied in your space as a salon is the Net Promoter Score. And that's something that, as far as I know, hadn't been done in the salon or beauty space yet. Kip, where did you hear about Net Promoter Score? And what made you decide that would be a great way to integrate? And for anybody listening, if you're anything like me, probably had heard of that maybe once, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you what exactly is the Net Promoter Score. So will you please share with us your journey to using this and what it looks like day to day with your clients and gathering feedback?
Yeah, well, I'll start out with the simple fact that if you go to my website, amomentspiece.com, and search just a moment's piece, you could search a moment's piece Net Promoter Score or NPS, either one. You'll see a link because I publish exactly what I do, why I do it. And can I share my screen right now? Because I could show.
Yeah, let's try it. You can hit the share button and let's see what's going on.
Okay. So I'm just, for the people listening, I would highly recommend that you just go to amomentspiece.com and see how we feature our reviews right away.
But I think it'd be amazing to walk through like what we're seeing and how it's going here. So what you're doing with Net Promoter Score is really, really unique. And especially in the salon space, I would love it if you walked our listeners through what the Net Promoter Score is exactly and how you've made use of it in your business. You mentioned you have it on your website. I'd love it if you could share your screen and then talk it through with us for those who are just listening in, please.
Oh, I'd love to do that. Here, I'll share my screen. Just confirm that you can see it. So you go to amomentspiece.com. And I think if you Google searched a moment's piece Net Promoter Score or NPS, I created articles about this, but you go to my website, you hit read my reviews, and what I instantly want people to see is that I have over 13,600 reviews online from clients. And if you read and look closely, it even shows the date stamp. Here's one from today. Here's 1, 2, 3
Amazing.
from yesterday. So I can scroll back. Let's see. There were 3 from yesterday. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think, from the day before that. So it's a live process. And it's very intentional, and it's different than driving like Google reviews. I explain that in email in a website where all you have to do is type in amomentspiece.com/net-promoter-score, and you hit enter, and you go to a special page that I have that explains the whole way I have it set up and why you should do it. The magic of it is down on this one slide where I basically show you what I do is I set the software up that it sends each client every service, as long as they're new, a simple question. And it is not verbose. It is the simplest of simple question. It's just simply, thanks for visiting. Based on your visit, how likely would you recommend us on a scale from 0 to 10? It's really that simple. There's 2 things I'm doing. It's a short question. It's immediately after their service, a short question, and then I'm simply making the bar so easy to respond. All I want is a number from them. I want a 0 to 10 number. So they typically give me that number. And if it's a 9 or a 10, it goes directly to the website. Now, let's say they give us a 7, 8, or lower. But right after I ask them that question, we say, if you don't mind, why'd you score us that way? So then I show a process that at every time that happens, the guest services manager calls that. They first of all review it with the staff, and then secondly, they call the guest. And we find that process.
If it's a lower score.
What's that? If they get a lower score.
If it's a lower score, yeah.
If it's like 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, or lower. We review it with the staff to figure out what we could have done to make it 9 or 10, and we call the guest if it's below 8, if it's 8 or below. And you find that clients love that. They're just like, oh, I can't wait to go back for that attention. And then I display what our score has been. So recall, this is not how many reviews I've gotten online technically. It's not Google reviews. This is a measure of my actual performance internally. And it's basically correcting internally what we do instantly, same day. And then in the process, they, we get great correction, if you will, on what's happening. If that makes sense.
It does. And for those of you who aren't able to see the visual, it's definitely worth checking out. We're going to include a link in the show notes so you can see this, especially no matter what business you own. I love the clarity of the question. How likely are you to refer us? Bam. Straightforward. Everybody can answer that question. 1 to 10. Bam. I got an answer for you. That's just easy, straightforward. I hit a number and send. That follow up. Hey, and this is probably, I don't know if you have you probably do because you're an engineer. If you have a statistic on the follow through rate for the follow up question, which would be number one question, what percentage of your guests that receive that text actually answer and engage?
Yeah, we only send it out to new guests and guests that have returned after 6 months. Because I don't want to, if you're like a 4 to 6 week client, I'm not asking you every time, but I'm asking you every 6 months. So what that translates to is 1,500 texts a month. And I get back about 350 to 450 a month with a number. And I get back about 150 a month with a comment. And
all right. So roughly 25% are responding to that first text. And then about 10% total are giving you deeper feedback and more meaningful feedback. And that's about half of the people who respond to the initial text are giving you follow-up comments. That's excellent.
Yeah.
They're getting a pulse in real time of how your team is performing and how the experience is being felt by the guest. And I think something that you mentioned is very critical is then the follow-up sequence and process. I love that you don't immediately call the person and pander to them to make it right. You talk to the staff, try to get a bigger picture of what happened. Maybe there was a delay in their service, or they had to redo their gloss, or they had to rush the end of their facial appointment. You never know why the factors existed, but you find out before calling that guest and seeing how you can make it right. And either way, you're calling them. Will you share a time? I think that we had a conversation recently where you let me know that there was a time where there was a guest that gave a less than favorable review. And by the end of that conversation with them, like they became the most loyal fan ever. Can you share some times where what would be perceived initially as a threatening or negative experience became a turnaround pivotal moment and really increased the loyalty for you guys and your brand?
Yeah. I'll shift it. And I'll basically say, when you do this, you'll absolutely convert bad experiences to long-term clients. Because in many times, it's not an evaluation of whether you screwed up once or twice. It's more about how did you recover once you had that problem, and what type of commitment did you have to that person to sustain that relationship and show you care. So the way I'm going to answer your question is the example I think you're talking about is I had a client email me that they said, I was about to write a bad online review, but I saw how you replied to every review online, which our rule is we reply to every single review online, good or bad. And let's say it's really saucy. We say, when you're not happy, we're not happy. And we take all of your input seriously. We will seriously consider all of this input with our staff because we do that on a daily basis. And we'll be in touch with you if we have not been already to make this right. And then, and then I love that. I say Dodson, owner, cell phone, email. And I want them to have all that.
Pause. You give your real cell phone number out online with can you also share your social security number and your home address for those of us listening in? It's like Kip Dodson, 555. But that is exceptional and over the top and saying a lot. Now, I'm not criticizing it, but I do think if I was listening to this, my first reaction to that, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but that is really, that's a really aggressive approach, Kip. And I think you must be aware of that. That's like not common. I don't want anybody to have my cell phone. I don't even want my friends to have my cell phone number, Kip. Who are we kidding? Okay, I am using a little hyperbole, but let's be real. How scary was it for you to start putting that out there? This is on Google. This is for the general public to see. Hi, I'm Kip Dodson and I endorse this message. Call me. Okay, that's way, way forward. But I want to know how many people have picked up the phone, texted you, harassed you, or called you as a result of you putting your phone number out there in an effort to resolve an issue. Because if I was listening to this, I'd be like, I don't get a lot of bad reviews, but I don't want to have to field a phone call from a crazy person online. Tell me what that's been like for you and what you've noticed.
So let me give you if you don't want to do that for yourself personally, just be sure that you have a person that says this is the number to call. You could be your manager. It could be I think it helps to be the owner. But to answer your question, very few people call. Very few people email.
Okay.
What I'm doing is displaying to them our commitment to the simple, fixing it. And I'm showing, so I have literally already turned somebody saucing up the reviews. We really just don't have very many saucy reviews because we do what we do. So we've already corrected it, which is the point. Do you have?
You're putting out a fire before there's even smoke. You know what I mean? Like, like you said, that person who thought I was kind of bothered, I wanted to leave a bad review, so I went on to hit a review, and I realized this is the integrity. This is the way this business shows up. I'm just going to call them. I don't need to do this. I think a lot of people are looking for a place to just let off steam. They might have had, and maybe they did have a terrible experience. It sounds like unlikely with your business, but maybe they had a bad day, a bad experience. That stylist or team member provider had a bad day. But if I saw that kind of what you're doing is really demonstrating a partnership with the community. That's very significant. That's helpful to hear. It makes me less scared personally to try to do the same.
I mean, you're going to get less calls than you believe. I can see a woman maybe not wanting to do that. So just have a manager or an owner person that is that person. You're going to get very few calls. You could have your own dedicated line just for that, but make sure you're answering it.
Yeah, well, we have a salon cell phone, and that's not where we do our regular calls, but we do have that as a method of communication. Before, our software had a two-way chat feature that was enabled. But that being said, that would be a great place to be like, hey, this is Heather, shoot me a text. And now I feel disingenuous because this will be promoted publicly. But if I say that on Google, it's my virtual assistant that's going to be responding and saying, please reach out and text me. And then I also want you to know that it will be my front desk that's going to be getting the text. But I can still, as Heather, with my influence and my leadership in the salon, be interacting or maybe just advise on how that conversation would be handled. I never want to feel like I'm lying or being disingenuous, but putting that out there is just what a powerful thing to do. And maybe you don't have a salon phone number, but make sure you or a cell phone number, make sure you include your salon number. Please reach out to us. Ask for me personally. That would be something that could be maybe more boundaried if someone was worried about getting a text in the middle of the night from a very heinously angry guest. I think that's just so powerful what you speak to. And we're, no matter how on the ball we are and no matter how dialed in our teams and our processes are, Kip, we're going to have experiences that don't go the way we plan. We're going to have guests that aren't as happy or a team member who doesn't perform to our standards. Tell me, what advice would you give to someone listening, how they can lean into that rather than being afraid? I think a lot of us, I'm not really one of those people, but I think a lot of the sapiens tend to lean out when something feels stressful, there's conflict. And it's, what advice would you give an entrepreneur or a small business owner when it comes to that kind of conflict, how to navigate it? Because you got to get through it somehow. Can you give some empowering words to somebody listening who might be afraid to take this very forward approach to conflict resolution?
I think the script I gave you on any review, whether it's saucy or not, you say, thank you for your feedback. We take all of your feedback seriously and we review it internally with our staff every day and every week. And we will do what we can to make this right for you and then some. If you say that, I think that's genuinely true for everybody in our industry that's a professional. Put that outward message. I would tell you that the reason I have 13,600 5-star reviews and our net promoter score is the way it is because we're so obviously transparent about it. We aren't hiding behind anything. And at the end of the day, every one of us as professionals know we can make it right? Regardless of what would happen. There's not an extreme here that can't be fixed to some degree.
I mean, I've seen a few real mishaps, but not in my own chair or salon. That being said, I think you're right. There's very few things that can't be made right, or at least brought to a peaceful conclusion. And I think leaning into that with that kind of power, what you're discussing or what you're sharing is so clearly building trust. It is that transparency builds trust, the communication builds trust, the concern and nurturing you put into it builds trust. Even if I had my hair melted off of my head or a chemical burn, I would feel like, based on even just this discussion with you, I could reach out to Kip Dodson and he'd help pay for a wig and my medical treatment, or he would do something to help me be okay through this. And I would see that and instantly want to do business with your brand. Instantly. Yeah. It's very, very powerful. It does take extra time and steps, but what you've also shared and in the visual that you shared on this episode as well, if you go to his site and you look at that, you mentioned that you're very transparent with your guest experience. You're also sharing, there's no secret sauce. You pull back the curtain. So any business that's listening to this can say, wow, Kip has a real idea. And as entrepreneurs, especially creatives, I believe, I'm going to speak for myself, we can get overwhelmed and it can be a bit daunting to think, oh, it's a lot to follow up on. It's a big process. And you got to have, Kip has 2 managers and he's doing all this business so he can afford it. But if you've got just a 5-chair salon, having someone dedicated to checking that out. And maybe it's not every day, but maybe it's once a week. Maybe it's reaching out and just checking in on people. What you're doing has helped demystify how to really enhance a guest experience and communicate concern and build trust. And that's so powerful and very generous, Kip. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I thank you. I saw it. I used to kind of be like, people don't care about this, but then I was like, wait a minute. When you go, I don't want you to Google search a moment's peace and net promoter score. So I started writing articles about what I do, because part of the principle of net promoter score is if you have high scores. By the way, my score is usually in the high 80s. Last month it was 93. The month before that it was 94. That's world class. That includes all the detractors. So I'm adding all the detractors, all the mediums combined with all the positives. That's what my monthly score ends up being. Okay. So the rule of net promoter score is if you got great scores, guess what you're supposed to do? Tell everybody. You're supposed to tell everyone and be super transparent about it and be like, look at what we did last month and every month before that. Okay. Which is what we do in this industry, right? We tell people, look at this beautiful hair I just did just now, right? Well, take somebody through a tough journey. Like, this woman was really unhappy and I made this right. Like,
man, don't we all shine and sparkle with the right filters and the right lights and the right, everything and backdrop? But if we can, listen, before this podcast began recording, me and Kip were laughing. He doesn't have his background on. It didn't work out. He didn't like it. He's like, well, here's my office. And I thought, well, I've got a beautiful background because I know how to look on, I don't really know how to look on camera, but you get the idea. And then I said, Kip, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. And I flipped my camera around and showed him, I'm going to do it right now. Should I do it right now, Kip? Peek behind the curtain? I'm going to. Oh my God.
That is just a rave.
It's all the Father's Day cards. I've got a former father-in-law, a former husband, a father. I got all these people. I've got all that. I've got my stamps to mail all these cards to get them out on time. It's a disaster. My whole desk is a disaster. But look how good this looks on camera. What I'm trying to say is there's something very empowering about giving a look through the difficult experience or the negative experience, because we're all going to have them. And if you just show us your highlight reel, I'm going to think, well, Kip is an anomaly. Kip is special. I know Kip has his rough times, but I have no idea how a moment's peace navigates those rough times. They just have something figured out. And I'm just going to feel like an abysmal failure because I can't sort it out myself. And I think that's with these conversations. That's why I love this industry. We have so many down to earth and open people willing to share and support one another. In addition to that, though, I think that's so important for community building across disciplines and across professions. It really helps us learn, if there was a time where you were scared out of your mind in your business or you weren't sure what you were going to do, and then I hear you walk through that, I'm going to know that I can probably sort out the next challenge that comes my way. So I do think that peek behind the curtain is really awesome. The fact that you take time to write an article about it. This all sounds very engineer-esque of you, having these people are going to Google this because what I'm doing is unique and I've won these awards in my salon. Well, I'm going to write an article so when it's Googled, it's easier to find. And then you wind up just putting a whole page on your website that helps anybody who hears of what you're doing find those resources quickly. I just think it's a very generous approach and it's beautiful. And it makes a lot of sense why so much abundance has come your way as well in your business because of that.
But I want to bring this to the level of I'm a salon owner with 5 chairs. Okay. You have a POS software. Your POS software can do what I outline there. It doesn't have to be what I have at the moment versus what you have at the moment. You can do that. And if you can't do that, I'm totally willing to have a conversation with you, and you can find me online. My number is already everywhere, as we've said.
Go to Google and text Kip.
That's right. So I will show you step by step because it is not rocket science. I'm actually a little surprised that, and I've spoken to software companies about why they don't do it one way versus another, and they're just not great at doing the review process. And they don't consider the fact of, well, let's get it right before the client even gets out the door to hit a review instead of driving them to a review. When you kind of risk, you're really breaking the relationship there. You're like, hey, you left. Would you give me a review? Well, I'm not sure I'm not there yet. I'm not sure I'm there yet, right? Mm-hmm. You have a lot of that. But if they left, it would universally be applicable for every client leaving for you to ask the simple question, based on your last experience, would you recommend us on a scale from 0 to 10?
It's a question that would get my buy-in. It's not like I just barely met you. I'm not going to send 10 of my friends to you. I hardly know you. It's how'd that go for you? I love that. I think the approach. And like you said, it's not rocket science. Again, this is coming from an engineer with an MBA. And though it is not, aerospace engineering, it might feel like rocket science to some of the creatives. And I'm not insulting my kind. I'm just saying these are things that's like, oh, I don't even know how to add that feature in my software. Well, you heard it from the Kip Dodson's mouth himself. All you have to do is go on Google. In fact, in the show notes, I'm going to include Kip Dodson's cell number. And please, if you text him, say, I heard you on Brazen and Bold, and I just wanted to text you to see if this was your phone number. Let's do a campaign to blow up Kip Dodson's phone, send a selfie, tell him thank you. In fact, Kip, would it bother you if people texted you and told you how this episode impacted them or that it inspired them? Would that be a problem for you?
Would not be a problem.
Everybody listening, shoot Kip Dodson a text and say, thank you so much. Just say your phone number for us now. Let's do it. This is speaking of Brazen and Bold. I love it. No, I think that's great. Send Kip a text, tell him thank you. I think that's really brilliant. Before we wrap up, I want to know if you've got any, I would say like if there's like a common myth or a trap that you see entrepreneurs getting into, or someone who's trying to start out. Is there anything that you'd want to share with someone in that space who's listening right now?
A common myth would be that a common myth would be that you make more money as a booth rent hairstylist, because the stats show that if we do salons right, the stylists actually make more money inside a high-end salon, and they do more of their creative work. So lean into the simple. If you're a salon owner, lean into embracing the idea of going out there, discovering what it is you really want in your life, like being your own salon owner, your own chair owner, or whatever. But it's tough to do all of it. And if you're dividing it up amongst a team and you're able to just laser focus on your craft, you can charge more, you end up taking more home, and you have less stress. So, and your creativity, the stats back that up. I mean, statistically, if you look at high performing stylists in a good salon, they make more money than you would. The myth is that you make more money in a booth, but you have way more responsibility and risk.
When you think about I own a salon, I am a creative, and I do hair. So I can speak to all these points in a really personal way. There is something to be said about the emotional burden, the labor that happens when you're running a business, even if it's just your own chair, and thinking about getting those texts answered, those appointments booked, or handling certain things as they come up with inventory, etc., even in just your own space. There's something about that extra work that can begin to impede the creative process, where we really get into our flow and our zone of genius, our brilliance, and our connection with the craft. And so I think that is something to consider. I would love to know where those stats come from, if they're recent stats that cite those things. And that might be something we can include as well in the show notes. It's not something I expect you to pull up right off the bat right now, but that's a really great point to observe, because many commission stylists are only taking home 40% of what they're charging. So it might be easy to imagine that the salon owner is just making, bank over here with the other 60%, but looking at the involvement of what it costs to operate that kind of a space is very helpful.
There are outliers.
I love reading.
There are outliers. Don't get me wrong. There are definitely outperformers, in 10% of the field. But what I'm saying is that the super majority is what we've talked about.
Yeah, amazing. And I love reading research, and I love looking at those kind of reports. I just have a little bit enough nerd in me that kind of thing excites me, because I always like to say facts don't have feelings, numbers don't have feelings, just look at what they say. And I think it's incredibly empowering to know those things. So as an entrepreneur, someone who might be considering striking out on their own, to really look at those things and look to a mentor, someone like Kip, who'd be willing to help share the journey with you. Clearly being an entrepreneur was worth it to you, and that process was worth it. But like anything, there's always a cost associated with what we're doing. So finding someone that you can trust to walk you through that process before making your decisions is amazing. I think that's really helpful. Tell us as we wrap up, Kip, what currently in your life is bringing you joy? What's making you excited to get up every day, or what's bringing you joy that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, delivering beauty and peace every day is fun. What's bringing me the most joy is watching my kids grow up and become adults. They're 24 and 21. And so, yeah, I'm an empty nester. So I'm going through, counseling and therapy on that. But I'm enjoying that process too, starting to look forward to grandkids. And so I think that the salon spa industry keeps me, excited and keeps me engaged. And it's just fascinating. It's a fun career for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, if your kids are listening, especially your 21-year-old, you're not excited enough to be a grandpa that they should be trying to help that happen just yet. Okay. But I do think that's beautiful. My mom always said, hey, grandchildren are the reward that I got for not kicking, murdering you guys when you're younger. That's pretty morbid to say, but my mom would say, she's like, grandkids are the gift I got for keeping you alive and not throwing you out when you were driving me crazy. So I hear from my own mother that is the best reward there is. That's fun. All right. And also, speaking of being just nerdy enough to love reading statistics, I think I always want to know what the smart, interesting people in my life, not only what brings them joy, but what they're reading, where they're finding the most learning or growth. In the last couple months or a year, has there been a book that you've read on any subject, personal, business, history, otherwise, that's really brought meaning to your life, or that you'd love to share with listeners, you'd recommend to a larger audience that they pick up and consider reading?
I don't have one in particular because I've been reading so many different categories. I will say I've had more study, quite frankly, on the Bible lately, just because I think that if there's a book you gotta at least take seriously, it's that one. You can never dive into it far enough. And so I think it is the world's most published book ever in world history by a magnitude of 3 to 4 times. And there's a reason, because, when there's a hard time, there's lessons that are very simple in there. And it could be just as simple as forgiving and moving on.
I like that. There's so many beautiful wisdom teachers, contemporary and ancient, that we can learn from. You talked about talking to a therapist as your kids are leaving the house and you're an empty nester. I mentioned reaching out to a mentor, and we have resources as old as the actual Bible itself that are places we can look to where other experiences, whether or not you believe in that wisdom tradition, whether or not you believe in that as literal scripture, like there's still something to learn from all over the place. And I think it's nice that you share that. Thank you.
Well, I even like to speak to people who may not believe in the Bible. The undeniable truth of the Bible is that it's the world's oldest book, and it's written by not one person, but too many, more than we can all really accurately describe. And so any book that's sustained that long of a period probably has something in it that might need to be revisited. And so I just think even the world's smartest people ever, like Elon Musk, if we use him as an example, will tell you we don't totally understand everything. So we constantly have to be exploring what else there is about ourselves and about our spirituality and the people around us, for sure.
You alluded to holistic well-being at the very beginning of our conversation in your spa space and treatment, for example, with skincare. And I think when we understand and start to conceive of our own nothingness, our own unknowing, we begin to open ourselves up to a lot of information, and that can help nurture us in our mind, body, and spirit, which sounds like very much a part of your mission to deliver not only to your team, but to your community, and then with anybody listening here, which I think has been such a gift to all of us. So Kip, thank you so much for sharing a good part of your morning with me recording this, and I hope those who are listening get as much out of it as I did, and they better send a selfie and say, hey, what's up, Kip? And text him a picture and say that's what you get for sharing your phone number on the World Wide Web. All right. Thank you so much, Kip. Thanks for your time. And thank you guys for listening.